Hi, welcome to the NFPA LiNK YouTube channel. This page is dedicated to answering key questions you have related to electrical and life safety. Today we're going to discuss the sprinkler requirements for assembly occupancies based on NFPA 101, the Life Safety Code. So today we're going to talk about when sprinklers are required in assembly occupancies per NFPA 101, the Life Safety Code. Now, when we're talking about this, it's important to remember that there are a few different places sprinkler requirements may come in. We're going to focus mostly on the requirements in 12.3 and protection. But for example, sometimes depending on what type of construction you have, give this 1 second, I'll show you where that would be in 12.1.6. You could be required to have sprinklers depending on, like I said, the construction type, and then even how many occupants are in that assembly occupancy. But today we're going to focus on the ones in 12.3. So head over to 12.3 and scroll down to where we get to the sprinkler requirements, and you'll notice I'm in new assemblies. We'll take a look at existing too and just compare what we see there for requirements. So here you can see in 12.3.5 the extinguishment requirements. So there's first a section that outlines specific types of assembly occupancies that are required to have sprinklers. And this is regardless of occupant load for new assembly occupancies. So that's things like dance halls, discotheques, nightclubs, bars, restaurants, and assembly occupancies with festival seating. Then as we scroll down a little bit further, you'll see another requirement here, and this one is for when the assembly occupancy exceeds 300. So this doesn't call out specific assembly occupancy types. It just says that any building containing one or more assembly occupant, see where the aggregate occupant load of the assembly occupancies exceeds 300. So, if you had a movie theater type building where there's separate rooms, but that overall occupant load is over 300, then you would need to provide sprinklers. And then this outlines 1 through 3 outlines where those sprinklers have to be. So throughout the story containing the assembly occupancy, throughout all stories below, the story containing the assembly occupancy, and then in the case of an assembly occupancy that's below the level of exit discharge, it has to be throughout all stories between the story and level of exit discharge, including the level of exit discharge. Those are the two I really wanted to focus on today, and if we scroll down a little bit, I wanted to point out the enhanced content here. There's some really good information about where these requirements came from. So the sprinkler requirements in assembly occupancies have evolved over the years, especially following some large loss of life fires, such as the Station nightclub fire, that have really changed what those requirements are. So you can see it talks about 12.3.5.1, which was the one that called out specific assembly type occupancies. And this is where after the Station nightclub fire, we did see some changes. And then you'll even see here in 2021, we added parentheses 4 and parentheses 5. So if we scroll back up, you can see that would be bars and restaurants. And that was really because there was some ambiguity over like what's a dance hall and a nightclub versus a bar or a restaurant. So it was intended to just help clarify. So one thing I can do is I'm going to actually add this to my reference panel and then close that for a second. We'll head over to existing assembly occupancies so we can just see how they compare. We'll go to 13.3. Scroll down to 13.3.5, and let's actually open the reference panel so we can do a side-by-side comparison. Get to the extinguishment requirements. So here we have the existing assembly requirements on the left and the new assembly requirements on the right. The first thing you'll notice is that first requirement for the specific types of assembly occupancies. For existing assembly occupancies, that's limited to only those where the occupant load exceeds 100. Additionally, you'll see that the bars and restaurants that were added in 2021 for the new assembly occupancies is not there in existing. So you'll see it's just limited to dance halls, discotheques, nightclubs, and assembly occupancies with festival seating. And again, you have that 100 occupant load. The occupant load needs to be more than 100. Secondly, For new assembly occupancies, we had the requirement where if any assembly occupancy had an occupant load of over 300, then you needed a sprinkler system, and you will not find that in the existing assembly requirements. Instead, you'll see that any assembly occupancy that's used or capable of being used for exhibition or display purposes has to have a sprinkler system where the exhibition or display area exceeds 15,000 square feet. We can scroll through, and this just outlines where that sprinkler system needs to be. And then again, we had talked earlier about how different areas within the code may require a sprinkler system. So this is just a reminder that if, say, your construction type is going to require a sprinkler system, or maybe your dead-end corridor length or common path of travel, that then you would need a sprinkler system. So here we can really see the differences between the new and existing assembly sprinkler requirements. I hope that provided some insight into the sprinkler requirements for assembly occupancies. For more information about how NFPA LiNK gives you the knowledge you need to get the job done right, visit www.nfpa.org/link.